Welcome to the Plant Trainers Podcast, where we're helping people improve their quality of life through nutrition and fitness. And now, your hosts, nutrition and wellness coaches, international speakers, Adam and Shoshana Chaim.
Hey, I'm Adam Chaim.
And I'm Shoshana Chaim, and we are
Propelled by Plants. Today we bring to you episode 439, The Unprocessed Journey with Chef AJ and Glen Merzer.
In this episode of the Plant Trainers Podcast, we talk with Chef AJ and Glen Merzer about furthering the unprocessed journey. They are the co-authors of the popular book Unprocessed, and it's getting a makeover. If you're listening to this on release day, March 22nd, it's out today. And wait until you hear about all of the changes and tips and recipes and everything that is in this book. And Chef AJ is doing something just for you, so make sure that you listen to hear what that is. If you don't already know Chef AJ, she's been a guest on the podcast plenty of times before, and she's devoted to a plant-exclusive diet for nearly 45 years. She is a chef, she's a motivational speaker, she's a public speaker, she used to be a comedian, and she wrote the book, The Secrets to Ultimate Weight Loss, and she wrote the book, of course, Unprocessed, and she has been going live on YouTube and Facebook daily throughout this whole pandemic. It is absolutely amazing. And we're also really excited to introduce Glen to you today.
Glen is a playwright, screenwriter, and author. He's authored or co-authored 11 books with a vegan message. His latest book, Food is Climate, argues that the only way to reverse climate change is to put an end to animal agriculture. Glen is also the co-author of The Secrets of Ultimate Weight Loss and Unprocessed by Chef AJ, as well as other books advocating plant-based eating. In 2020, Glen wrote Own Your Health, to which Chef AJ contributed over 75 recipes. Prior to focusing on book writing, Glen had careers as a playwright, screenwriter, and stand-up comic, just like AJ. We know you're going to love this episode, so stay tuned and have fun with this conversation.
Great news, everybody. I Am a Peaceful Goldfish, my picture book, is available everywhere books are sold, in stores and online. It's perfect for any children ages 0 to 7, so stock up on your birthday presents and baby shower gifts today. We do have a limited amount of signed copies. If you would like one, please email us at info@planttrainers.com.
And now for a moment of gratitude.
I know that Adam has talked about seeing our kids play volleyball in the last little while, but I have finally had the opportunity to watch our children play and compete, and just I've been so proud of them, and I'm so grateful that they are able to experience the competitive lifestyle and be active.
I'm grateful for the weekly muffins that you make. They are fantastic, and I know our son loves them for lunch as well, so I am just grateful for being able to have them every single week.
Chef AJ and Glen Merzer, thank you so much for joining us on the Plant Trainers Podcast today.
Thanks for having us.
We're going to have to decide who talks first and things like that. It's wonderful when we have 3 boxes on the video for those of the people who are checking us out on YouTube. Super excited to have both of you today. We have some exciting things coming up in your lives that we'd love to talk about. But right now, in this moment, what are each of you grateful for? Glen?
Well, I'm grateful for my wife, Joanna. She takes good care of me, and we have delicious meals, and I feel healthy and loved.
You look healthy and loved.
And it's always good to have that support person. I mean, I'm always grateful for her as well, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
And AJ, what are you grateful for today?
Boy, I really do try to be grateful every day for everything, but might sound weird and be controversial, but I'm actually grateful for COVID, because as horrible as it's been, I think it's been a tremendous opportunity for so much growth and for so much good in the world. And I'm not grateful for the fact that COVID is a horrible disease that kills anyone or people suffer. Don't get me wrong. But what it's created, at least even in my life, was an opportunity to do what I call a pandemic pivot and interact with way more people in a more meaningful way and do more good in the world. Because by not being able to travel, I had to figure out what to do to stay at home, and it created opportunity. And I think it's been, for other people as well, it's been a time of reflection about what really matters. So I always tend to look at the good in things. When my great grandmother, when I was 4 years old, got her leg amputated from type 2 diabetes. And I wasn't trying to be facetious. I said, well, you don't have to shave that leg now. And I know that's weird, but that's how I think. And so the minute something bad happens, I look for the good. And so I'm grateful for COVID, for the good that it has provided and for the good that it's going to do long term.
Well, I hate to be competitive with AJ. She's been a great blessing in my life. She's a close friend, but I think Joanna is better than COVID. So score one for me.
We're really lucky that we have the technology that we have today. Because can you imagine if we didn't have the ability to connect with so many people virtually when this kind of pandemic's going on? Like, what would we be doing? It'd be crazy.
I can't. What was it like for the first pandemic in the early 1900s?
I can't imagine. Craziness.
So here's my question. We're recording this just at the end of January, and I believe everybody's listening to it just towards the end of March. So how many weeks or how many days or months have you been going live every single day, AJ? How long has that been?
I started on March 20th, 2020. And the reason I started was because our governor said in our state we had to shelter in place. I didn't even know what that meant at the time. And I tried to go live with my private group and I pushed the wrong button. It went live everywhere and people started to watch, like 500 people, because they wanted a sense of community and connection. But it got tiring just having me. So I would call all my friends who are like bigwigs like you in the plant-based world. And so I've gone live every day since March 20th, sometimes multiple times a day, as many as 5 times a day. So by the time this airs, I'll be close to 1,000 shows. And that's what I'm trying to get to, 1,000 and get some big celebrity on if I can. So if you have any suggestions, somebody suggested James Cameron, but I don't know if he'll come on or if I can even contact him.
Wow. Well, maybe somebody listening, if he hasn't been on yet, maybe if somebody listening has some kind of connection for you, that would be amazing. Amazing. So Glen, we've heard from AJ before how her journey started with plant-based, and we're going to put the link
AJ's been on our show before.
AJ's this number 3 or 4. This is
the third one.
I think this is 3. So we'll definitely put the link in the show notes to go back and hear a little bit of your journey of how you found plant-based nutrition. But maybe Glen will share how he found plant-based and what that did for him in his life. And then maybe you could share how you found Glen. How does that work?
Great. Right. I became a vegetarian initially at the age of 17, just for my own health. Not that there was anything wrong with my health. I was a healthy teenager. But I was watching all my relatives die, especially the male relatives, in their 50s. My mother lost 2 brothers, so I lost 2 uncles. One was actually in his late 40s, one in his 50s, to heart disease. I didn't know my grandparents. They were dead before I was born. And so I just looked around and I thought, well, if I eat the way these people eat, I'm middle-aged at 25. Do I want to be middle-aged at 25? And so I just decided I needed to stop eating meat. And I don't frankly remember where I heard that meat causes heart attacks, but I think everybody knew it back in the 70s. I mean, I think it was just common knowledge. And it's still common knowledge, except now there are lunatics out there who deny it. You know, you just look at a hamburger, it looks like a heart attack. So I gave up meat, but I had an obese aunt and uncle who were very worried about me. And they looked at me and they said, well, what are you going to do for your protein? So I said, I'll eat cheese. And so I didn't eat eggs, I didn't eat fish, I didn't eat chicken, but I did have cheese. I was doing it just for safety, as it were, because I thought, okay, I have to do something for my protein. I knew nothing, obviously. Yeah. And then in my mid-30s, I started getting heart pains. And I thought about it and I said, well, I'm not eating meat because of the saturated fat and cholesterol. But I'm eating cheese, which is liquid meat, saturated fat and cholesterol. So I thought either I could go to a cardiologist and have this checked out, or I could stop eating cheese. And so I stopped eating cheese, and I never had a heart pain again. And it was just stupid of me to eat cheese for 19 years. So anyone listening out there who's a vegetarian and not a vegan, you're not doing it right. Got to go vegan.
Liquid meat.
Yeah.
liquid meat. And I wrote down here, you just look at a hamburger and it looks like a heart attack. Yeah. I mean, we want to know that the foods that we like or our habits that aren't necessarily the best for us, we want to know that, we could squeak by, we could be the one that gets by and, not be affected by it. But the truth is that more and more people are. And, you're right. We always heard, I don't eat red meat. I don't eat red meat. And I think now people are starting to realize that, chicken's no different, and they're really starting to make that connection. So hopefully somebody listening will connect with what you said and be able to give up the dairy.
Dairy is the most addictive. That's the thing. I think, those of us that are in this space of plant-based nutrition, we always say the first thing that should be given up is dairy. But I think for a lot of people, that's the hardest thing, because that's the thing that's the most addictive.
I also think that people need to continue to build an awareness around the impact that the food that they're consuming really has on them, and stop just coasting and just shoveling food in without thinking about it, because everything that they eat really has an impact, positive or negative, but people don't really consider it as much as they should until something happens, until it's a little bit late, and then they got to react to what they've done for the last several years. And it's not always a quick fix, especially when you're doing something for so long. You can't expect it to all fix itself overnight. It's going to take time. So I think building an awareness around the food that we're consuming is super important, and the impact that it has.
So you have both come together multiple times to create amazing resources for people to use along their journey. How did you meet, and how did that begin?
I can't get rid of him. He just won't leave me alone. I mean, I even, he moved to, I don't even know.
He moved across the country.
Across the country. I still, Glenn, correct me if I'm wrong. I think we met at the Passover Seder of our mutual friend, Michelle. Could that be correct?
No, I think we knew each other then. I think we met at Jeff Nelson's Veg Source event in Woodland Hills.
But we didn't become friendly, I think, until Michelle invited us. I think.
Maybe. And, what I remember, it was this big Veg Source event, hundreds of people there. And there was this one woman who kept talking whenever there was the microphone for the questions for the doctors. There was this one woman who kept going to the microphone and asking 5 questions. And that was Chef AJ. And I didn't know who she was. So at some point, either I introduced myself or somebody introduced me to her, and we became friends. But I think she got more attention at that Veg Source event than like Dr. McDougall.
Well, I was trying to get them to ask me to speak, and they didn't ask me until the very, very last conference that they had.
Well, and you haven't stopped speaking since. I mean, every event we've spoken at, you've been there for sure. And then, tenfold. So you're extremely coveted now. People love to hear what you have to say, and they love showing up for you. And I mean, part of that is because you've been so well known for your book, Unprocessed. And why don't you tell us a little bit about what's going on with that now?
Well, a publisher wanted to buy it originally, and Glenn really didn't want to let it go to a publisher because he had experience with publishing, and so he really wanted to self-publish, which, there's pros and cons, I'm sure, to both. And so I never realized that dream of being with a publisher, and maybe it's not a dream, maybe it's a nightmare, huh, Glenn? But the thing is so we're joking because our publisher is of publishers couldn't be nicer. He's a vegan guy, vegan hippie named Bob Hopfisel from Glenn. What's the name of his company? Tennessee. Yeah, but what's the name of his company?
Oh, it's very hard to remember. The Book Publishing Company. When I heard there was a publishing company called the Book Publishing Company, I said, let's go with these guys. They're very creative.
No, but it's true because I've always liked Bob. I mean, every event that I was ever at, he was always there, and his authors seemed to love him, and he's just a kind person. And, I just really liked him. And so the idea was that things have changed. When we write a book, I think when anybody writes a book, we write the best book we can at the time with the knowledge and the information we have at the time. When you know more, you tell people. And so we thought Unprocessed was a good book, especially my first book. But I learned more as I started to study more and take, the Dr. McDougall Starch Solution course and the T. Colin Campbell Nutrition course. And so we decided to update it with what we had learned, but also this time too, because we had a publisher, we could include some color photos, which we didn't have of the recipes. And we had the enormously talented food photographer, blogger, and chef Hannah Kaminsky do the photos, which are going to be a nice addition. We added 30 new recipes. And probably most important is that we provided alternatives for the recipes that were there. So I did not understand calorie density before 10 years ago. And that's why I was 50 pounds heavier. I was fairly healthy, but I had excess body fat. And by putting the dessert section at the beginning of the book was not the best idea. And a lot of the recipes were very high in fat, which for people that the book was intended for, like my friend Sharon McRae, who was transitioning 3 young children, this was fine, but it really wasn't for people that were trying to lose weight. So what we did is we kept the original recipes to keep the integrity of them, but provided low-fat options. So I learned ways to do that. So for example, a very popular recipe in Unprocessed, a very simple recipe is called faux parmesan. You take walnuts, you take nutritional yeast, and you take seasoning, either with salt if you eat salt or salt-free, and you make this sprinkle that's delicious on vegetables and lasagna and pasta, even on popcorn. But it's really high in fat from a couple walnuts. Well, I found that, guess what? You can use oats. Oats have significantly less fat, but it tastes delicious. So tweaks like that. Or for example, places where nuts were being used, I found you could use beans. So we give the original recipe, the updated way to do it, 30 new recipes, photos. And what else has changed, Glenn? Because you're more
and
about
a forward by Dr. McDougall.
Yeah, that's pretty nice because he doesn't have, when you asked me what am I grateful for, I probably should have said that because he generally doesn't write forwards. And so that was very, very nice of him.
That's pretty cool. I love hearing these updates. There are people listening that probably haven't heard of the book Unprocessed. They probably didn't listen to our previous episode. They didn't get the book. What's the essence of the book other than the recipes?
You take it, Glenn.
Well, the essence is to eat a whole foods, plant-exclusive diet. So rather than getting your food in boxes, in the supermarket, you go to the produce aisle, and you get natural plants, and you use AJ's recipes to turn them into delicious dishes. So if you take plants and put them in a food processor, it's still a whole food. But if you get it in a box and it's mixed with a whole list of ingredients that you can't read without your eyeglasses, then you're not eating a whole food.
So I want to comment on that for a moment because I just want everybody to know that there is no such thing as silly questions, as stupid questions, because sometimes people are scared to ask questions. And I have had people ask me personally, if I put it in my food processor, does that make it a processed food? And I've seen people ask that in Facebook groups as well. And oh my God, do I ever feel unrepresented and unconnected to a community before with some of the sarcastic answers that they get. So you should have a safe place to be able to ask questions. And yes, you're right. If it's mashed up by us, it's not processed, right? There hasn't been things added to it to make it taste better that aren't grown in the ground. And sometimes it's okay to have a ton of ingredients, especially if you're making it yourself, when you're making chilies and stews and throwing the whole kitchen refrigerator and all of that in. But you're right, when you need your eyeglasses to read it on the can. So these are the things that people need to understand so they don't feel like they can't get what they need.
I think the distinction is that, I think of refined versus processed. So we could have called the book Unrefined, but that would have been a whole nother story, right? because technically, unless you grow the food and pull it out of the ground, everything's processed. Seriously. I mean, because what does processing mean? I looked it up in the dictionary, and here's one: perform a sense of mechanical or chemical operations on something in order to change or preserve it. We don't mind minimal processing, putting chickpeas in a blender to make hummus. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about stripping away vital nutrients, fiber, water, antioxidants, things like that. That's what we mean. So we mean that processed food they shouldn't call it food, in my opinion, but the problem is the ultra processing. It's what they're doing to it. And so if you put a bunch of vegetables in the Instant Pot and push the button, yeah, you're processing it. And if you zhuzh it in a blender, you're processing it, but everything is still intact. You know what I mean? And I think to me, that's the difference is the refining of it versus the processing. So Glenn, maybe we should change the name?
No, don't change the name. No, don't change the
Just
name. I
kidding.
think people need to understand that. And that's what's so amazing about it. And that's what's so important. But why is it so important to eat this way? Let's talk about that for a couple of minutes. Taking a little break to let you know that the best gift you can give your child is the tools that they need to get through stressful situations, especially in the world that we're living in today. Stock up on birthday presents and baby shower gifts by ordering a signed copy or a regular copy of my new book, I Am a Peaceful Goldfish, at planttrainers.com, on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, Indigo, or anywhere books are sold in stores and online. It teaches mindfulness and playful breathing techniques for kids and their families to use when they're feeling overwhelmed, using their imagination and inspiration from objects found around the house to help them feel calm and grounded. This book is going to be amazing in your home. And now back to the show.
Why is it important to eat this way? Well, this is the optimal diet. And we're not changing the name because I'm working on my autobiography, which is going to be called Unrefined. The optimal human diet is a plant-exclusive diet that is low in fat and is whole foods. And as far as I'm concerned, that should be considered settled science. I make that point in the book Own Your Health, to which AJ contributed 75 plus recipes. But in Own Your Health, I make the point that people think of nutrition as being controversial. It's only controversial in the sense that in the media, you can find stories that, a paleo nut said this, which contradicts settled science. Because there are no studies that show that heart disease can be reversed with sausage. There are no studies of the health benefits of fried chicken. Every single study that has, serious results and can be taken seriously shows the benefits of whole plant foods. And there is no scientific study that shows any legitimate benefits to any animal foods, period. It's just that if you take a study of 150,000 people who are self-reporting their food intake, then you could always find people who can interpret it. Well, it looks like the people who ate fish did a little better than the people who didn't eat fish. So the fish reduces heart disease. Well, no, that's if you want to do a serious study, you take 100 or 1,000 people who eat the way we do, who eat a low-fat plant-based diet, and then you compare them to the people who eat fish, and then you see. But if you're going to, have a broad population, you could always misinterpret the data. So all the science shows that the optimal diet is a whole foods, low-fat, plant-based diet.
I just thought of a good answer to your last question while Glenn was talking. I think where it's processed is significant, because the thing is I don't know. I actually knew one person, and that's because that was their job, but I really don't know anybody that can go out in nature, tap a maple tree, get 40 gallons of sap and boil it down to 1 gallon of maple syrup. So thinking of it as you want to eat food that comes from a plant rather than being processed in a plant. But I think the processing that we do at home is not the same as what the food manufacturers do, because I don't know anyone really that can make white flour or white sugar or agave or maple syrup or most people can't even make pasta. You can if you're a chef, but think about it. So really where the processing is happening, I think is significant. Glenn?
Not to mention oil.
Yeah, I don't know anybody.
Let's mention oil. Let's mention oil and sugar and salt.
Yeah, that's the thing. We're SOS free. That was the other thing, by the way. I forgot to mention that in the book. So again, I wrote the best book that I could, but the book came out weeks before I met Dr. Ellen Goldhammer. And I thought the book was SOS free because none of the recipes had oil. None of the recipes had sugar, just using dates. And none of the recipes had salt. I didn't realize what a stickler he was, but he's right that some of the products that I used in Unprocessed, I used very low sodium ones, things like coconut aminos and low sodium miso. I didn't think of them as salt, but he mentioned that they have salt in them. So they're technically not SOS free. So keeping the integrity of the recipe, we kept that in, but then we gave the option on what to use to replace that. So SOS free, sugar, oil, salt free, as Dr. Goldhammer says, is the international symbol of distress. And I don't know if everybody has to go sugar and salt free. I think they should minimize it for sure, especially if they struggle with food addictions and excess weight. But I never understood oil. I mean, I never understood why people ate oil. It's not food. And, most people, whether they eat sugar or not, recognize it's not really healthy, and they can't make it in their own kitchen. I mean, maybe you can make date syrup in your own kitchen, but people can't make white sugar or brown sugar or molasses or any of those things, barley malt, rice syrup in their own kitchen. And they might eat it, but they know it's not a health food. But yet people think of oil as this holy grail. And even people in the vegan movement are just touting it as this miracle drug when it's not food. It's this fractionated item that nobody can make in their own kitchen. It's a very toxic process, actually, that involves lye. If you've ever saw, oil being made, it wasn't eaten throughout most of human history. It's not consistent with our species' natural history. Yes, our ancestors ate fat. And as one of the things we say over and over on Unprocessed is we're not against you eating fat in its whole food form. Nuts, seeds, avocado, maybe even a little coconut, things that are higher in fat like tofu, not a problem. But no human being needs oil, just like nobody needs to eat dairy except from their mother. When and how this oil got into our food supply, I know Dr. Hans Zeil talks about it, I believe in one of his talks. It is ridiculous. Oil used to be considered a prize at the Olympic Games that the athletes used in ancient Greece to adorn their body. It wasn't something we put in our mouth. And I just don't get it because it tastes terrible. I mean, it really does. Have you ever really drank it by itself? It's pretty disgusting. And in high doses, it's even an emetic. It will make you vomit. And the only way people can really tolerate the taste of oil is to put a lot of salt into food. And, the thing is, when people say, well, I don't know how to decrease, I don't know how to cut down on salt. Well, stop using oil. Until people really go oil free, they don't realize how much better their life's going to be. Because first of all, if they had any kind of complexion problem, it's going to go away right away because it's just a ridiculous amount of fat and saturated fat. And, I remember I used to be a pastry chef, an obese pastry chef at a restaurant. I was the executive vegan pastry chef for years at Santé restaurant. And I really didn't use oil, but there was one recipe thing I had to make that used, the vegan version of Crisco when they asked for it. I tried to have all my recipes be SOS free. And I remember I always chose to work late at night and the dishwasher would go home by then. So I had to wash my own dishes. And I remember I couldn't get the grease out of my food processor. I had to soak it. And I'm thinking, if you can't clean your dishes with oil and your pans, imagine what it's doing to the insides. And when people finally go off oil, not only do they lose weight if they need to lose weight, but they save so much money. They save so many calories. And people say they like oil. Oh, I'm Italian. Olive oil's in my blood. Yeah, it's in your blood, giving you a heart attack, it's in your blood. But what people don't probably understand unless they read our second book, The Secrets to Ultimate Weight Loss, is what they're responding to is calorie density. People love high calorie, high fat foods. We're hardwired that way for survival. And so what people are responding to is there is nothing as calorically dense on the planet as processed and refined oils. They're 4,000 calories per pound. And the more calorically concentrated the calories, the more dopamine is released. So you don't really like oil. You like the hit of dopamine you get from eating something that high in calories. So if you want to eat a high calorie food, just eat some peanut butter, eat some almond butter, but stop the oil. Oil is for cars. It's not for people.
It's a hard conversation. First of all, that was amazing. That needs to be a talk just on its own.
TED talk on oil.
Yeah. But it's hard.
It's for a car, not a person.
It's hard for people to understand. Just the other day, and I approached it with love, and I kind of clicked my phone off and said, okay, sending prayers, something I'll post one day will click. But it was, what do you mean you don't use oil? You don't use any oil at all? But what about high quality oil? And then it was like, oh, well, to each their own, right? To each their own. But when you look at the situation of Adam's heart disease going away completely, and their family is in a different position where cardiac patients consistently, weight staying on consistently, you have to kind of break it down to say, well, what's responsible for that? And what do you have to lose by giving yourself 30, 60, 90 days without it and seeing how you feel different? Sometimes you don't realize how bad you felt until you feel really good, right?
Absolutely.
So what other books have you guys collaborated on, and where else can some of our listeners find some great information?
Well, as I mentioned before, we collaborated on Own Your Health with 75 recipes from AJ. It's my analysis of nutrition and my personal stories plus AJ's recipes. And then AJ contributed 5 recipes to my book, Food is Climate. And then she wrote, and I helped her with the editing of the bestseller, The Secret's
The Secret's to Ultimate Weight Loss. Thank you, Glenn, because I tend to write like I talk. It all comes out really fast and in a lot of words. And Glenn is like David, who chiseled down the Michelangelo. That's what he does to my work. So that was a really fun project we did together. And Glenn, I think
it was Michelangelo who chiseled down the David. You see how I help?
No art history. But Glenn, didn't you say you learned something from working with me on Secrets?
Oh, I learned a lot from working with you on both books.
No, but I mean, because like what's really interesting is Glenn is like my husband. He's a slender guy.
Wait a minute. Charles is your husband.
No, but I mean, you don't, I think that you really didn't understand food addiction when we first came together. Like, cause you'd even say, well, I don't understand why this certain person is overweight. Like, I don't think you really understood that the impact it had, or that it really was a disease for some people, that because people like you and my husband that have never struggled with weight, you might look at this like, well, I don't get it. Just like I don't drink alcohol. And so I don't do this, but I don't say to people that are alcoholics, well, I don't get it. But I think you learned a little bit and maybe had more compassion and understanding as food addiction as a disease.
Well, okay. I'll take that. I've never had that kind of addiction. So even cigarette smoking, I intellectually understand that nicotine is addictive and it's difficult for people to stop. I understand that, but I've never experienced it. So, and it's the same with food addiction. To an extent, I mean, I know as a kid, I ate a lot of cookies. So I remember that, eating sweets was hard to stop. I experienced that. But it's true that I was never very overweight, but before I stopped eating oil, I'm 5'8.5", and I was about 160 pounds. And when you're 5'8.5" in America and you're 160 pounds, you know what people call you? They call you skinny. So people called me skinny, but I stopped eating oil and I went down to like 150, 148.
Same thing happened to my husband.
And now they call you emaciated.
or anemic, or you have an eating disorder, or all those things. I mean, I've gone through a lot of that too. I have a hard time believing some people just don't get it, like that food addiction is real. I've gone through that myself, and not because I've never had addictions like this either, and I've always maintained my weight and been fine. But it's a real problem. People have a serious challenge. Some people, in understanding that they are addicted to food and that there are ways to make changes for that. And it's really something serious that people are not aware about.
And the hardest part for those people is once you start, right? Like you've been good for a long time, or good, I shouldn't use those words, but you've been compliant or staying away from those addictive foods for a long time. And then you say, well, it's a birthday, or I'm going through a stressful time, or, well, there's a reason to do it. And then you start, and then it's very easy to not stop again, that next hour, and then continue and then get back into it. I mean, that's something that I experience myself when I'm off of those types of foods. I feel great. It's easy, but then, easy to get back into that as well, especially when the people around you don't understand the reasoning for that addiction and how it pulls on. And they go, you can't not treat yourself. How can you live like that? And they're taking their emotional attachment to food and putting it on you and peer pressuring you into it with good intentions. They're not trying to sabotage you so you gain 30 pounds back, 60 pounds back, but it does sabotage a lot.
Well, you're talking about the pleasure trap. And if you guys haven't had Dr. Goldhammer on, I would love to introduce you because I think he'd make a fabulous guest.
We would love that.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
I'm remembering now eating salted nuts, and those were addictive.
Yes.
You get that salt and you just you had salt plus fat and you just want to keep eating it. So I did, I guess, experience that kind of addiction.
I'm so sorry that my brain is a little behind today, but I just thought of something else because, we learned more things since Unprocessed came out the first time, mainly from me working at the True North Health Center and getting to know Dr. Lyle and Dr. Goldhammer. And while Unprocessed in its original form was SOS free virtually, I don't think we really knew how powerful the pleasure trap was and the why of SOS. And one of the things I've learned since, and I don't know if you probably know this, Glenn, now, is that sugar, fat, and salt, as they exist in nature, are perfectly fine. An avocado, which, by the way, for our ancestors mostly was seasonal. We didn't have access to these high-fat foods like we do today, where you can go to Costco and get 3-pound bags of nuts in shells. Nuts came in hard shells for a reason. There was no really processed or iodized salt. Salt was in the food, like in the greens, and the sweet came from fruit. But if you look to nature, and somebody once said to me, whenever there's a problem, look to nature for the answer. Sugar, fat, and salt do not exist together anywhere in nature. They don't. So sugar, oil, and salt, that's processed food. That's restaurant food. So you cannot find, except for breast milk, you can't find any food in nature that has sugar and fat, that has fat and salt, that has fat and sugar, or that has sugar, fat, and salt. And so that to me was really important to learn.
That's fascinating.
I'm smiling because we were in the grocery store. We were driving down to Florida and our tire blew and we had to get it fixed. So we went over to the grocery store to get ourselves some lunch. And I was kind of walking past the vegan cheese and meat section, and a woman stops to look at the vegan cheeses. So, I wanted to make chit chat and find out, is she plant-based? Is she vegan? What's going on? And she said that she's not vegan, but she doesn't eat dairy. She said she would drink goat's milk if she got it directly from the farm, directly from there. And I said, oh, really? Why is that? And she said, because it's identical to human breast milk.
Really?
And I said, okay. And, I was stressed and the car had blown and we wanted to get back on the road. And that could have been a whole conversation. But I was like, once I walked away and got in the car and I said to the kids, I'm like, I should have said to her, like, how often do you drink breast milk? It was just so awkward to me that I don't know. I don't know. People learn things from either sources that aren't scientifically backed, or they make up these stories so that what they're doing seems okay when somehow they know that it's not. And the more you learn and the more you get plugged in and the more you're around supportive people, the easier it becomes. And anyway, that's a story.
So tell me, what are your favorite recipes from this book? Because you do have a ton of recipes in the new version, right? So maybe each of you can tell us one of your favorites.
Absolutely. And I'm curious if Glenn even tried any of the recipes, but I got to tell you, the fan favorites have stood the test of time. And the reason I say that is just after 2 years, I finally did my first in-person cooking class, like at a culinary school. And I did recipes from Unprocessed. And the one that has really stood the test of time is the lasagna, the disappearing lasagna, which in the first version was on page 100. I don't know where they'll be. It's one of the ones Hannah Kaminsky took photos for. It really is the best lasagna that I've ever tasted, and that many people have said that. So that one for sure, if you want to impress people, is actually the only one that's a little bit more difficult to make. Most of them are fairly easy. And then the other thing is I'm still doing the recipes from Unprocessed at the spa in Mexico that I teach at Rancho La Puerta. They're that good. And the other one that they love is the stuffed mushrooms, the pesto stuffed mushrooms, which of course now we have a lower fat version. You can use beans instead of the pine nuts, but those two have stood the test of time for sure. Oh, the other one that people love is the quinoa salad with the pistachios, which are optional now in the new version, and currants and pomegranate seeds. That one I get a lot of wonderful feedback on. And of course, all the desserts, because, I was a pastry chef. There's one that people don't make a lot, but it's so good. It's like Reese's peanut butter cups. It's called Hockey Pucks. And they're really good.
Those sound Canadian.
We got to make them.
They sound Canadian.
Yeah. Glenn, have you tried any recipes from Unprocessed?
The disappearing lasagna, and it disappeared.
It disappeared. Amazing. Well, before we all disappear, we would love to know for each of you where you would like people to go if they want to order the book. Can they pre-order it? Where can they get it? And where would you like them to reach out to you and follow you on social media?
Well, it should be available for pre-order by the time this airs. So on Amazon. But if some people don't want to go through Amazon, it'll be available at all of your leading bookstores.
Great. And we will link to that in our show notes at planttrainers.com as well.
Thank you. And for me, I mean, who knows what the future will bring, but for now, every day at 11 a.m. Pacific time, I am on YouTube and I can interact with you live in the chat where I have a fascinating guest. Shoshana's been on a couple of times. Adam, you haven't been on. I've got to get Adam on to tell his story. Because Shoshana's been on twice and Adam has been on none.
Yeah.
Zero. Zip.
She's
none.
beating me 2-zip. Yeah, we can make that happen.
Absolutely. I'm going to write myself a note right now.
I can't beat him on the road, so I need to beat him somewhere.
There we go. But also good. Chef AJ is my name. If you go to chefaj.com, we'll send you some recipes that you might enjoy. And we send out the list of who's going to be on the show for the week. And whenever there's something exciting going on, just find me at chefaj.com.
Well, Chef AJ and Glenn, thank you both so much for the impact that you're making through the books that you're writing, through the online teaching that you're providing and offering. We really appreciate what you do for the community and everybody around. So always great having you on the show, AJ, and welcome back again another time, Glenn. Thanks for being on the Plant Trainers podcast.
Well, thank you guys for the work you do.
Thank you all so much for listening to this edition of the Plant Trainers podcast. We want to make sure that you subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, or any other podcasting platform.
We really appreciate the feedback we receive from you every time we get a 5-star rating or review on iTunes from one of our fans. It really helps other people find us just like you did.
Thanks so much to our patrons. To become a patron, visit us at patreon.com/planttrainers. Even supporting us with $1 really makes a difference in the quality of the show.
And don't forget to connect with us on Instagram and Twitter. Our handle is @PlantTrainers. Like Plant Trainers on Facebook, join our newsletter, and check out our website at planttrainers.com for awesome recipes, a list of our services, and of course, our latest podcast.
We encourage you to email your questions to info@planttrainers.com so that we can help you improve your quality of life through nutrition and fitness.
So we hope we've inspired you today. Join us again next time and have a healthy day. Or is that too corny?
It's a little cheesy.